Reporting we are now in day 6 with no end in sight. And another looming deadline is staring us right in that face. Only 11 days to go before October 17th, when we, of course, are being warned that our government will run out of money and hit that dreaded debt ceiling. And if we do, there are warnings of economic catastrophe. And as we just heard House Speaker John Boehner saying he will not let the U.S. government default. This as President Obama continues to dig in, the White House saying that he will not negotiate the debt ceiling crisis with Congress. Meanwhile, our debt continues to grow. Man, oh man, oh man, look at that. It's just going zzz, right up. Nearly $17 trillion and growing even during a shutdown. So when will this shutdown end? And how do we get our debt under control? Republican Congressman Todd Rokita of Indiana is a member of the Budget Committee and joins us now from Indianapolis. Congressman, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, good to be back.
You think there'll be a deal before we run out of money?
Well, I sure hope so. We're certainly working towards that. But in order to have a deal, in order to come to a resolution, you have to talk. I mean, whenever there are serious disagreements, whether it's within your family, Eric, or your neighbors, or whatever, you can't get to resolution until you talk. And here we have a president and a Democratic Party that will talk to Iran, talk to Russia, talk to Syria, but they won't talk with fellow Americans. And I think that's a huge problem in this, in answering your question.
Well, the House Speaker did go to the I'm sorry to interrupt, but the House Speaker did go to the White House, and they sat for, what, about an hour or so the other day? And it's the White House that blames the Republicans.
I don't know what for. I mean, we offered 4 different resolutions to this, and we haven't sat down at the negotiating table. You know, there's a process in our Constitution for this. It's called a conference committee, where both sides in a divided government situation sit down and work it out. We offered 4 different plans, and every time, Eric, we were told no, 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 and no. And my understanding from what happened inside the White House with the Speaker of the House was that he was told no again. So, no, I mean meaningful talk, not just so you can go out to the camera and beat up the other side over the head and say that you had a meeting.
So how do we get to that point?
We have to have leadership.
Yeah, I mean, both sides seem to be dug in. The Speaker, apparently, according to reports, could be working on a stopgap spending bill, maybe cobbling together, what, the 200 Democrats and 20 Republicans or so to get this thing open again. Do you think that will happen?
Well, yeah, if we wanted it to be rolled over. But here you got to understand, we have a right, we have a duty under the Constitution in the House of Representatives to control the purse strings, to decide, in fact, what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. That is what our job is. And so when if you don't believe that, if you don't understand that part of the Constitution, then we have a problem here. And by the way, I don't have any idea why the Democratic Party and the President and Harry Reid want to keep beating up on certain members of our society called the Tea Party. Which, by the way, whether you go to a Tea Party meeting or not, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in spending cuts and not putting more on your plate in the here and now so your kids don't have to pay for it later, then you're a Tea Partier. That's all these folks want, and that's all these folks believe in. And by the way, I think it's a large section of America. And to have the DNC or whoever was in the last segment keep putting out press releases saying, just denigrating another section of America, I don't think is good politics, and it's certainly not right, regardless of the politics.
As you know, the Tea Party, I mean, its members, you were elected with their help. I mean, they're getting a lot of the blame. But where do we go? Let's take a look at some possibilities that are being discussed now to try and solve this. I mean, any deal, if there is a deal, could cut spending. Could there be a dollar-for-dollar cut for every hike? You cut it. You know, what about Obamacare and that, that medical tax?
I think that,
you know, you get Medicaid, Social Security, slowing the growth there, a means test on Medicare. You know, long-term tax changes. What, Congressman, do we do?
I think that can all be on the table. I think it's important for your viewers to realize and for us to remember that the continuing resolution is on the discretionary side of the budget. It's about funding really only about 40% of the government. Just like your Social Security checks are still going out, just like Medicare services are still being provided. 67% of that, where those services and that money comes from, is what we call mandatory spending. So this continuing resolution, or the CR, that has caused the shutdown business, is only about 40% of their budget. What's driving our debt and why we're hitting the debt ceiling, which is to come in a few weeks, is because of this mandatory spending. So you're right. Anything, if these two issues, the CR and the debt ceiling, are conflating into one, if we're going to raise the debt ceiling, we have got to do some things to pay down that debt, what is driving that debt. If we just keep raising it without correcting the problem, we're just leaving the children of tomorrow with our bills. And that is immoral. I can't really think of anything more un-American, and that requires leadership, and that requires everyone to understand what we're doing to people who don't yet exist.
So finally,
yeah, any deal will have any.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. And briefly and finally, what happens? October 17th is not that far away.
Well, I still believe that there is leadership to be found in Washington. I continue to look for it. I continue to try to work with it. And I think hopefully cooler heads will prevail, will realize that we are Americans here. We have to protect the children of tomorrow, and we have to reform the drivers of our debt, Eric. And I'm still hopeful and optimistic that that will happen.
All right, Congressman, we'll have much